Have you ever heard the ghost story of Halloween 1944? It's not about witches or ghouls, but about a real-life ghostly army that materialized in the dead of night, deep within the foggy forests of the Ardennes. This is the chilling story of when Hitler ordered a spectral march on All Hallows Eve, a desperate, last-ditch gamble to reverse the course of World War II. It's late 1944. The tide of the war has decisively turned against the Third Reich. Just a few months earlier, on D-Day, the Allies had stormed the beaches of Normandy, creating a massive foothold in Western Europe. Since then, they've been pushing relentlessly eastward, liberating France and pressing toward Germany's borders. In Paris, General Eisenhower is confident. His intelligence officers, and indeed the entire Allied command, believe the German army is on the brink of collapse, a spent force with no capacity for a major offensive. They thought the war could be over by Christmas. But they were dangerously wrong. Inside his heavily fortified headquarters, the Wolf's Lair, Adolf Hitler was brewing a storm. He was isolated, increasingly detached from reality, but still capable of one final, monumental roll of the dice. He refused to accept defeat. He believed that with a single, devastating blow, he could shatter the Allied coalition, force a negotiated peace on the Western Front, and then turn his full attention back to the Soviet Union in the East. This audacious plan was codenamed Operation Wacht am Rhein, or Watch on the Rhine. The name itself was a piece of masterful deception, suggesting a defensive posture, a guarding of Germany's frontier. The reality was anything but. The plan was a mirror image of the brilliant German blitzkrieg that had conquered France in 1940. The idea was to secretly amass a massive armored force in the Ardennes forests, the very same impassable terrain the Allies had underestimated 4 years earlier. This powerful fist of panzer divisions would then smash through the thinly defended American lines, race across the Meuse River, and capture the vital port of Antwerp in Belgium. Cutting off the British and Canadian armies in the north from their American supply lines would, Hitler gambled, create a crisis so severe it would fracture the alliance between Britain and the United States. Was a plan of staggering ambition, relying on complete surprise, terrible weather to ground Allied air power, and a speed that seemed impossible for Germany's depleted forces. To achieve this surprise, secrecy was paramount. And so, the preparations began under a shroud of absolute silence. As October drew to a close, the Ghost Army started to assemble. Hitler decreed that all preparations must be completed for a mid-December launch. The initial movements had to begin immediately. And so it was that on October 31st, Halloween night, the first phantom-like movements began. Imagine the scene. Under the cloak of a cold, moonless night, elite Waffen-SS panzer divisions and veteran Wehrmacht units began disengaging from other fronts. They moved only after dark. Their vehicle engines muffled, their headlights off. Radio silence was strictly enforced across the entire Western Front. Any soldier caught transmitting a signal faced the gravest consequences. During the day, thousands of tanks, artillery pieces, and supply trucks were camouflaged under dense forests, hidden in barns, and covered with foliage-draped nets. Invisible to the Allied reconnaissance planes that still occasionally braved the autumn weather. For the Belgian and Luxembourg civilians living in the small villages dotting the Ardennes, it was a terrifying and confusing time. They had been liberated just weeks before. Now, strange and unsettling things were happening. They would hear the faint, muffled rumble of engines in the dead of night, a sound that chilled them to the bone. Some reported seeing long columns of indistinct shapes moving like phantoms along remote forest tracks, only to vanish by dawn. It was as if the ghosts of the German army were returning. These weren't specters, they were the vanguard of Hitler's last great offensive, over 250,000 soldiers. And more than 1,000 tanks, silently creeping into position. The Allies, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware. Their intelligence reports noted some troop transfers but dismissed them as minor defensive adjustments. The Ardennes was considered a quiet sector, a place to rest and refit battle-weary American divisions or blood-new and experienced troops. The few warnings from frontline units about a build-up were ignored by high command, dismissed as the jitters of green soldiers. The deception was working perfectly. for 6 long weeks. From that eerie Halloween night until mid-December. This ghostly build-up continued. The German soldiers waited in the freezing cold. Huddled in the damp forests, their morale a strange mix of dread and fanatical hope. They were told this was the Entscheidungsschlacht, the decisive battle that would win the war for Germany. They were the specter that would haunt the Allies' dreams of a swift victory. Then, in the pre-dawn darkness of December 16, 1944, the Ghost Army came to life. A massive artillery barrage shattered the silent morning, and tens of thousands of German soldiers and hundreds of panzer tanks surged out of the fog-shrouded forests. They slammed into the stunned and unprepared American lines. The Battle of the Bulge had begun. Initially, the attack was a shocking success. The German spearheads punched deep into the Allied lines, creating the famous bulge in the front that gave the battle its name. The ferocity and scale of the offensive caught the Allies completely by surprise. For a few terrifying days, it seemed as if Hitler's insane gamble might actually pay off. But the American soldiers, though outnumbered and surrounded in many places, fought back with incredible courage and tenacity, most famously at the crucial crossroads town of Bastogne. Ultimately, Hitler's plan was doomed. He had underestimated the resolve of the Allied soldiers, the logistical might of the United States, and the eventual clearing of the weather. Once the skies cleared, the Allied air forces, the Jabos so feared by German troops, were unleashed, wreaking havoc on the exposed German armored columns and their fragile supply lines. The Ghost Army, which had materialized so suddenly from the Halloween mists, began to dissolve. Starved of fuel and ammunition, pounded from the air and counterattacked on the ground, the offensive ground to a halt and was then mercilessly pushed back. By the end of January 1945, the battle was over. Hitler's last offensive had failed, and at a catastrophic cost. He had squandered Germany's last strategic reserves of men and machines, leaving the path to Berlin wide open. So when we think of Halloween, we think of fictional ghosts and goblins. But in 1944, a very real phantom army was on the march. Hitler's Ghost Army never achieved the victory it sought. Its charge was a death rattle, not a resurrection. But that chilling, secretive march that began on All Hallows Eve stands as a testament to the war's final, desperate chapter, the last time Hitler would attempt to haunt Europe with the specter of his dark ambitions. Thanks for watching. If you found this piece of history as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button, subscribe for more stories from the shadows of the past, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.